Hello. I want to talk here about one of the most difficult taxing problems that salespeople have, which is how do you win when the customer has and wants to take the do nothing option? Obviously, sometimes the customer knows they need to solve a problem. They've already decided that, and then you've got to win the battle between you and a competitor, and that's hard enough. But oftentimes it is harder when the customer simply has that easy do nothing option. As you probably know, there's some data out there that says maybe up to 75% of sales pursuits are lost to that do nothing option. So how do you win in that really difficult environment? My name's Tim Pollard of Oratium. So let's get into this interesting question. A lot of times with very modern contemporary solutions, maybe you're offering now more of a more digital solution, kind of a digital enablement of a process. It is the kind of thing that the customer can just say no to because what they have is working. It may not be working great for them, but it is working. So how do you get them to move to your solution? Well, I think the number one word you want to fixate on is destabilize. You have got to destabilize their status quo. You've got to make them see that what they're doing right now is actually not acceptable, that it's hurting more than they realize, and that in fact, the pain of the status quo exceeds the pain of the change. Let me say that again, that the pain of the status quo exceeds the pain of the change. So if you're going into a sales pursuit knowing the customer has the do nothing option, you've got to really focus on that, which is, okay, how do I make sure that they see that the pain of doing nothing is greater than the pain of doing something? Now, how do you do that? Well, what's the huge mistake that we make? We think that the way to sell it is just to make sure they know that our solution, our product is just amazing, that our value is just incredibly high. That's completely wrong. If I don't perceive I need to move, I don't care how good the solution is. So what we tend to think is if I can just say my solution is amazing, that will get the customer to move, but that does nothing to get them thinking about the pain of the status quo and the pain of the change. So how do you do it? Well, the key word obviously there is pain of the status quo. What all great sales messages do, and particularly sales messages that go after the do nothing option, is a deep and thorough problem analysis. Your job as a seller is to make sure that the customer begins to see that the problem is bigger and more widespread and more serious than they thought it was. You're not trying to be alarmist, you're not scaremongering, but what you want to do is a thorough problem analysis or deconstruction. That's how you get them to move. So that leads to the big question. Great, I get that conceptually, if I really lead with and linger on the problem, it is more likely to destabilize that customer's willingness to do nothing. How do I do that? Well, I want to give you a really powerful tool. It's called the root and fruit analysis. And the root and fruit analysis is your key to developing a great problem narrative. Now, what does it look like? Let me show you. The first thing you want to do is define or perhaps describe the customer's problem in very broad terms. So imagine you had a lighting solution for hospitals, say a lighting solution for senior living facilities. This is a real message we helped a company build. What you want to do is start with a broad statement of that problem. So, hey, the way you're doing lighting is kind of hurting you, and it's hurting you a lot more than you think it is. Now, the reason you want to be broad is you don't want to put yourself in a box. What you want to do by being broad is give yourself room to develop that problem. And that's the fruit piece, the multi-part fruit of that core problem. And the way to think about that is ask yourself the question, okay, looking at that broad problem, who does it hurt and how? Well, interestingly, it's really easy to look at lighting and just say, oh, well, your problem is you're spending too much money on lighting and LED is really cheap. Yeah, that's not a very compelling message. But if you think about bad lighting in a hospital and ask who does it hurt and how, you get some really interesting answers. We know that bad lighting hurts nursing productivity. People don't work well in, and they don't like working in dark environments. So you might have unproductive nurses and they might leave, and that's devastating. We also know that bad lighting can impact your brand. If you're a senior living facility and families have a choice where their elderly mother's going to spend her last few years, you want that facility to look bright and welcoming. Well, bad lighting can really affect that. You also know that bad lighting can affect safety. Dark, poorly lit stairwells or hallways are just places where accidents can happen. People can get mugged in parking lots. So safety is an important aspect. That leads to all kinds of legal risk. There are legal risks associated with getting lighting wrong with safety, and also and particularly if you have a problem with clinical outcomes. In fact, it's true that in a poorly lit hospital, people can be misdiagnosed and sometimes medicines can be misdispensed. Now, I want you to look at that. If you're a hospital CEO or in fact a hospital buying group, how compelling is this? And ask this question. If I just come to you and said, hey, you're spending 15% too much on your lighting bill, would you be likely to go for a major lighting retrofit? No. But if I came to you and said, look, you've got unhappy, unproductive nurses, your brand image is suffering, you've got safety issues which are creating for you legal risk, and also you might have clinical outcomes problems, and of course if you ended up with a tragedy you could also end up with more legal risk. Here's the question. How easy is it for the customer to say no to that? It's really, really hard. Can I say no to improving or solving my nursing productivity problem, my brand problem, my safety problem, my legal problem? No. So you see what happens. The root and fruit analysis is the way you destabilize the status quo. It's the way you get the customer to see that the pain of the status quo exceeds the pain of the change. You've got to do some work here. You've got to understand what the customer's broad problem is, that you solve, by the way, and what are its individual manifestations. This is one of, if not the most powerful tools when you're building a sales message. And don't just leave this as a moment of learning. Click on the link below if you want to, and you can download the root and fruit template. You'll see the blank template there with some useful helps. And what I'm going to challenge you to do is for the next sales conversation you're going to have, take a bit of time, analyze that problem, build out that broader problem narrative, and slot that in right at the start of the conversation and see what happens. And we would love to hear from you. Tell us how that went. Hey, thanks so much for your time. I hope this was helpful.